Welcome to the Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Saturday, we explore stories that are shaping the African continent. This week, it's all about Ghana. The country is preparing for its elections set for the 7th of December and is set to go to the polls to elect a new president. The political landscape is heating up as candidates gear up for a highly competitive race. Then, Ghana's Jubilee oil fields production drops to 89,000 barrels per day due to the issues with the J69P well and downtime at the Ghana Gas Company. Ghana owes $40 million in overdue gas payments, while cocoa buyers pay over 500 million upfront to Cocobod. The organization faces a $1 billion loss from unfulfilled contracts. How could the drop in oil production affect Ghana's economy? Joining us for insights on this episode, we have Kofi Agayi from Accra, Ghana. Welcome, Kofi, to
Thank you.
the weekend. So let's start off with what is the immediate economic implications of the reduced oil productions in Ghana's Jubilee oil fields?
Well, first, there are three commodities that are the backbone of the Ghanaian economy, and gold is number one, followed by cocoa and then oil. But in terms of actual returns and what the country actually gets from exports, then you can say that cocoa is number one because we end up getting close to 90% of, or more than 90% of whatever we export in a fiscal year, unlike gold and oil that we get roughly about 15% of what is exported every year. So that tells you that, when you have a dwindle, inflows from both oil and then also cocoa, that tends to affect the Ghanaian economy. And the most immediate impact possibly has been on the Ghanaian cedi, which has been battered, struggling against major trading currencies like the dollar and the euro and the pound since the beginning of the year. It is just recently that, due to some form of injections from the central bank, we've seen the cedi gaining some momentum and strength. But in summary, these reductions in terms of inflows and forex inflows would definitely have an impact on the Ghanaian economy, which is still healing from that shock they had post-COVID somewhere starting from 2021 to 2023. The Ghanaian economy is still healing, and some of these, setbacks not really good for the country because currently the country has actually defaulted on debt payment. It's been given moratorium up until 2026 to start paying some of its debt. And so it is hoping that some of these revenues will crystallize so that when the country start resuming its debt payments, it will not find itself wanting and may not request for another debt restructuring. And so when you have such huge tickets ahead in the Eurobond markets and then also in other bilateral debts, repayment and multilateral as well. And you have some of this news, it's definitely not good for investors and for the country as a whole.
Okay, thank you for that. But my next question that I would like to ask is what the effect of the borrowing would have on the economy. So you have the $40 million in overdue gas payments to the Ghana Gas Company. How does that affect the energy sector and the broader economy as well?
Well, Ghana's energy sector, we always say, is actually a debt-making machine. Why do we always say so? Because this is a sector that generates about 2 billion of debt every year, and majority of it comes from the power sector, electricity. And what makes Ghana's situation a bit, dicey is the fact that if you look at the nation's energy mix, 64 is more than 64% thermal. That means that at every point in time, the country needs gas to produce energy. Although if you look at the Africa and the West African, landscape, Ghana is one of the country that has one of the most stable power supply. It also struggles with legacy debts, and then also honoring its debt servicing obligation in the energy space because of the high levels of energy sector shortfalls, because you have the Electricity Company of Ghana, which is the body responsible for the distribution and sale of electricity, almost having all of its operations in dollars, but it's generates revenue in cedis. So whenever it's time for them to convert that cedis or the local currency to dollars to go and pay back their debt, it becomes a challenge because of the forex losses. And so if you're looking at the debts of 40 million that is owed some of its major gas supplies, that tells you that whoever, I mean, we'll come to the election aspect, but whoever wins the presidency or whoever wins the race to the Jubilee House should know that there is a huge burden ahead in terms of the energy sector, where they have to cough up about 1 billion or more than $1 billion every year to buy gas, to feed its thermal plant that produces more than 64% of its national energy mix. And if you are looking at the legacy debts, in fact, there are different templates to learn from this year, where we've had some of the independent power producers who depend on this gas supply deciding to shut down when we've had pockets of power outages across the length and breadth of the country, and that has really, really, affected economic activities in the country. And so, definitely, if you have the legacy debts, especially in the gas space, increasing, is a big threat to electricity supply. And I mean, whoever wins, then whoever becomes the next president of Ghana is aware that, I mean, for you to have a very stable economy or for your economy to be on the green side, you definitely would have to solve the energy sector problems well. And in fact, some of these legacy debts don't really look good. And if you look at it, Ghana isn't just owing, some of the gas supply 40 million. It owes the West African gas pipeline huge sums of money. And this year, for instance, there were threats from WAPCO that they were going to shut down as a result of Ghana's inability to pay their debt. So definitely, these are some of the issues that will keep recurring. And whoever becomes president must find lasting solutions to some of these challenges.
I mean, my next question to you was going to say, how does Ghana address the issue? But you went ahead to say that, that's the critical thing that, or the next step that, the incoming president will have to address. So let's move to the Ghana election. So we know this weekend, Ghanaians are going to the poll. I know we spoke a bit about the Ghana elections last week, but this week, coming to the polls, I would like to just get a sense of what are the key issues that are shaping the political discourse in Ghana ahead of the upcoming elections.
Well, I mean, first of all, hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
I can go ahead, right?
Yes, please.
Well, I mean, Ghana has a very interesting political landscape, and since 1992, we've always gone to the polls to elect a president, and this will be our ninth election. And if you look at the key issues that are on the minds of voters, top of it is issues around the economy. Why? Because, I mean, this is a country that suffered a huge economic shock right after the pandemic. You've had a number of investors, about 1.3 million individual bondholders who lost their investment through different forms of haircuts and debt restructuring. And then also you've had inflation that peaked around 54% somewhere December 2022. It is now settling around 23%, ending the year possibly around 24%. That tells you that the Ghanaian economy is still heating up. And then, I mean, one cousin to the economy will always be depreciation or the exchange rate. And we know that the Ghanaian cedi hasn't really performed well against major trading currencies. For instance, This year, we started the fiscal year with $1 to about 11 cities, 50 pesos. Now we are talking about $1 to somewhere 15 cities, 16 cities. That tells you that within just a very short period, the city has depreciated by more than 20% against the dollar. And many Ghanaians are really looking at some of these economic issues, and then will possibly decide where their vote will go, whether to the green side or the blue side in the coming elections. Now, apart from the economy, there are also other important issues that Ghanaians are really, particular about, especially unemployment rates, which is currently around 18%. If you look at the youth unemployment rate, or the Ghanaian youth who are possibly not employed, not in education, or not in any form of training, is more than 20%. And this year, for instance, you have about more than 40% of the total registered voters being the youth. And I always say that this is Ghana's first typical Gen Z election, first typical TikTok election, where we expected more than 2 million Ghanaians to go to the polls, in terms of being Gen Zs to go and vote. And if you do the math, you realize that this will be their first real economic hardship that the Gen Zs are witness. What will be the wave? Are they going to swing to the blue side or swing to the green side? Speaking about blue and green side, we know Ghana's election is won on a very simple majority. You need to get 50% plus one to become the president of Ghana. And after the election, if nobody is able to get 50% plus one, then that tells you that the election will go to a second round between the top party and then the first runner-up. Going into this year's election, the incumbent government, which is on the blue side, the NPP, the New Patriotic Party, is campaigning heavily on their main flagship program, which is the free SHS, the free senior high school. Senior high school in Ghana is free. It started under the current administration somewhere around 2017, and they are campaigning heavily on that. On the green side, you have the main opposition party, which is the National Democratic Congress, the NDC, led by former President John Dramani Mahama, who is also heavily campaigning on the economy and telling Ghanaians that, look into your current situation and vote. So we are asking a very simple questions. The Afrobarometer report shows that about 9 out of 10 Ghanaians want the free SHS program to be maintained. Is that going to swing, or is that going to kneel to the benefits of the incumbent government, or the current economic hardship will swing the 15% floating voters who always decide where Ghana's election go? Is it going to be that way? So it will be an interesting election to possibly look at in terms of Ghana's political landscape, and whatever the outcome, history will be made, possibly at the end of 8th or 9th December.
Thank you. It's really interesting to see how social media is also changing our elections and changing, the response of voters. I mean, you mentioned that this is a Gen Z election, and a lot of young people are going to the polls to vote this time because they have reached that eligibility age. So moving on, I want to say, like, what measures have been put in place to ensure that the election is free, fair, and peaceful as well?
Well, I mean, one characteristic of Ghana's election has been the fact that it's been generally peaceful since 1992. We've had a smooth, transfer of power, except for 2012, where, I mean, there was a smooth transfer of power anyway, but there was a court case where, I mean, the opposition party was not happy with the results, but went to court. And whenever there are issues, Ghanaians will always resort to, going to the Supreme Court, like it happens in Nigeria as well. But I mean, Ghana has gone to the Supreme Court in terms of election issues twice, 2012 and 2020. Now, going into this year's election, looking at how competitive the election will be, it is going to be a momentous election this year, and it's going to be keenly contested. In fact, at this moment, if you look at the figures and the data, it is still very too close to call who will win the Ghanaian election, and that makes it's extremely difficult to try and predict how the security situation will be. I mean, in the 2020 election, there were pockets of violence during that election. But this year, the police or the Ghana Police Service have stepped up their game, and they are saying that, look, they are going to have, they are going to strengthen their surveillance. And if you are possibly in Ghana, you realize that every day you hear the sound of helicopters and police, in the air, on ground, trying to make sure that the elections are peaceful. In terms of fairness, we've had a number of complaints from the main opposition party with respect to the EC or the Electoral Commission of Ghana, which is like the INEC in Nigeria, possibly being in bed with the incumbent. But it's almost the same everywhere. When elections are being held, you had the opposition party always making such claims. But what the EC has done is to make sure that they increase the number of polling stations to make sure that people vote on time and there are no long queues. Everybody gets a chance to vote. So they've actually increased the number of polling stations from the a little over 30,000 that we saw in 2020 to now more than 40,000, adding significant number of polling stations to this year's elections. And we also know that, in fact, the collation of the results will also take a very smooth path as per what the EC has put out, where we are going to have results moving from polling stations to regional coalition centers. And the national, coalition center will just be a platform where tabulations will be done. So certainly that gives, the Electoral Commission at the top very little chance to, in quote, possibly massage any figures. If you want to win the Ghanaian election, you need to win it at the polling station. You can't win the Ghanaian election, or you can't influence the election at the national level. Why? Because unlike Nigeria, where media houses are precluded from possibly calling the elections, in Ghana, I mean, media houses play an important role in churning out the election figures and even making projections. And so, right from the word go, you have media houses having their personnel scattered across the 276 constituencies across the length and breadth of the country. They will be monitoring results and be doing their own tabulation. So it's always difficult to possibly maneuver your way through in rigging elections in Ghana, because you have the media playing that important watchdog role, where every pink sheet in Ghana is seen by the media, is recorded by the media. They know what the MPP got, they know what the NDC got. So it's always difficult to have figures being changed at the national level. And for me, that layer and that kind of advantage that the media has, or freedom, makes elections a bit free and fair, maybe compared to other countries across Africa.
That's really interesting to know the role that the media plays in ensuring accountability the election. So down to our final questions. I just want to know, like, what do you think that the election's impact will have on investor confidence in Ghana's economic recovery plan? Do you think that it would boost that and drive more investors into the country, but even in-house investors?
Well, for investors, this will be the most consequential election ever conducted by Ghana. Why? Because first, you've had investors who have restructured their investment, especially I'm talking about the bilateral level, the commercial level, and even at the multilateral level. I mean, that side was not restructured anyway. But if you look at the investors as a whole, especially at the commercial level, they are keenly, monitoring this year's election, because whatever happens has, direct ramifications in the, in international investor space. You had the main opposition party led by John Dramani Mahama, who says that, look, when they come to power, they are going to renegotiate the IMF deal. Renegotiation, nobody knows what it will be. But if you're an investor and then you are hearing that there is an opposition party which seeks to renegotiate the IMF program, you ask yourself, how does this affect the terms and conditions that we've already agreed with the incumbent government in terms of when next Ghana starts paying our debt, or when next Ghana starts honoring its debt servicing obligations. So for investors, this will be a very consequential election. For the main political party, or for the incumbent government, they have said that they are going to stick with the IMF deal, and that they may not perform any form of significant changes to the current arrangement, and investors are aware. And just like what happened in the US, whatever happens in Ghana will also have a certain form of, let me say, block effect in terms of in the West African space, not just the international investment space, but in terms of security-wise, Ghana's election will be the most recent litmus test in terms of testing the democratic temperature in the West African space. We've had a number of coups in West Africa, and we've had a number of flawed elections also in West Africa. How is Ghana's own going to be like? And in terms of results, how is the opposition or the main political party going to accept the final result? And so investors are watching. They know whatever the outcome will be, it will have a direct impact on their investment portfolios in the country and doing business with Ghana as well. In fact, possibly it could be one of the reasons why the country struggled to even get the cocoa syndicated loan this year. Ghana was looking for 1.5 billion in terms of forward sales for its cocoa beans. We understand that they could not get it because investors were placing high risk. Could it be that the high coupon rate that they put on the cocoa syndicated loan, was there an element of political risk? Were they scared, or were they concerned about the outcome of the election, or was simply because Ghana had supply restrictions in the 2023-2024 cocoa season, or they are really particular about the outcome of the election? That's why they were placing high risks on Ghana's cocoa, and as a result of that, we know Ghana could not attain or could not get that 1.5 billion cocoa syndicated loan. And so, I mean, it will be an interesting election, and investors will be watching. Whoever becomes president, there is a direct, cost or benefit for investors.
Thank you very much, Kofi, for your brilliant analysis. I mean, having you on this podcast is always insightful. Thank you for breaking down the Ghana elections and, telling us about the blue and the green side, and, the role that the media plays as well, and looking forward to the Gen Z elections, as you put it. So thank you very much for joining us, and we wish you and Ghana all the best in the upcoming elections.
Thank you, Sue.
To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insights into our work, visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning in into the week ahead. Join us next Saturday for more updates shaping the African continent.